Thanks everyone for coming today. I'll pass it over to Paula. Would you like to introduce us?
Hello everyone and welcome again to one of our iGEM sessions. We are very happy to be live streaming as part of our online residency with Space Concordia. My name is Paula and I'm a team leader in iGEM Concordia project. This year our team is working on a solution for the biomanufacture of food with yeast and space. And during our project development, we analyzed the impact our technology has to the community. Today, we will be looking at the bioethics and public perceptions of technology in the space industry as part of our real-time technology assessment. Dr. Caron, would you like to please introduce yourself and explain this whole process?
Sure thing. So I am Dr. Brandiff Caron. I'm an associate professor in the Center for Engineering and Society at Concordia University. The Center for Engineering and Society is a unique model in Canada. So we are social sciences and humanities scholars who study engineering and technology from social, ethical, legal, environmental perspectives. And as a result of the new CEAB accreditation requirements, we recently employed a technology assessment mechanism for all engineering capstone students. And we've been borrowing that. I developed that, and we've been borrowing that model and using it with iGEM for the last 2 years. Well, this is our second year, so last year and now this. And it's real-time technology assessment. So it's got a funky meaning. There's something called the Calling Ridge dilemma from a policy analysis. And just to say very briefly, the idea is that you can't know what a technology is going to do before it's employed. And after technology is employed, it's often too late to do anything about it. It's just doing what is done. It's hard to undo it. And it's a general dilemma that shapes design processes a lot. So the idea of real-time technology assessment is attempting to get around this dilemma. And as new technology is being designed, we think about the social, ethical, legal, environmental implications of it and try to make technical decisions based off of non-technical considerations like society and ethics. And last year's, I think, worked really well. And this year's even more fun. So I'm wearing my Star Wars shirt for this. I just want to highlight that. And I'm super excited. I think we're at step 3 of a 4-step process that we've developed for real-time technology assessment, and that's the public perceptions. And I'm really excited to see what the team has put together.
Thank you so much for the intro. I'll start screen sharing the PowerPoint slides that we prepared for today. And then my colleague Lancia will take over the presentation. Can we all see the screen share?
Yep.
Okay. Let me just.
I love this first slide. Thank you to, was it Grecia that did it or Lancia?
Well, we took it off of a slide Hajar had made and threw you on it.
Love it. Like I'm hanging out in outer space.
Great, yeah, so I'll walk through the first part. It is Grecia's research, however, she's having internet problems today, so I'm going to cover it for her.
How do you say her name? Gracia?
Grecia? Say both, but yeah, we'll ask her when she drops in. Yeah, so Paula, you can go to the first one. So she began with some research. We were looking at space agency media and what was out there. So we see media conferences, which are open to journalists and the public, lots of press releases, often by their own media relations teams. So we're talking about Canadian Space Agency, NASA, which we're all very familiar with, European Space Agency as well. There's quite a few space agencies across the world now. Web portals specific to the agency, which if you look up anything NASA related, you usually end up on the web portal. And social media, which this was kind of a fun fact she came across. NASA had 300 social media accounts, which is a little insane. I guess they're trying to bring them together now. So we can go to the next slide. So yeah, they kind of spread awareness. They take steps to keep the public informed. We're looking at bionutrients specifically here at this point. So nutritional challenges are expressed a lot. We hear that in the news. How are we going to feed them, keep them healthy? So they are undergoing a bionutrients program, which we looked at in the RTTA1. So similar to what we're doing, producing nutrients in microorganisms. They've shared that through Facebook and web portals. And the US government is also looking at Symbio. And we recently spoke with the Canadian Space Agency, who has undertaken bionutrient initiative recently as well, and is interested in synthetic biology. So it's being portrayed from what we saw in these media as an emerging discipline with untapped potential. So for synthetic biology. Next, please. So this is straight from the document that she had drafted, which I found really beautiful. So this idea that there's not really that much published about bioproduction or production of bionutrients. And so for a lot of reasons, public perception related to these kind of technologies is very closely tied to the public perception of space exploration. And yeah, also, again, while researching and looking for information, you see that the space agencies perhaps are really trying to control the narrative around space programs. They release so much of their own media, whether that's just because that's how it's always been. It was a government organization, I'm not sure. They also put a strong emphasis on making it look like a fun activity for youth. And then, of course, tied to a country's optimism, can-do attitude, and national pride. And yeah, so we found bioproduction of nutrients and synthetic biology to an extent. As long as it's seen as a key driver for innovation, public perception seems pretty favorable. There is some discomfort, of course, associated with the high costs and that it should be maybe applied here on Earth. But we do see the NASA programs do talk about how they could be, like a lot of their technology would benefit people on Earth. Next, please. So some fun facts that Grisha pulled up. Pretty positive. Again, it's kind of a fun topic, something like you grow up with, so that might have something to do with it. Canada, there's a little bit of the one survey that she found that we're falling behind other countries. We did speak with Space Concordia, who kind of brought some insights as to our rocket program here, and it's kind of asking why we don't have our own rocket program in Canada.
I'm curious about these numbers too, because Chris Hadfield is one of the most famous astronauts like in the world right now, and he's super Canadian, isn't he?
Yep.
It's only 42%. Well, okay, 42%. They think they're falling behind. Chris Hadfield.
Yeah.
Chris Hadfield.
I think they're thinking technologically, like as far as that would be my guess. I have to read the report again, but Chris Hadfield definitely doing some good things for Canada. And Paula, we can go to the next one. Yeah, so moving on, there's just kind of some things that we saw, some threads that were woven through a lot of the articles we're reading, and I'll let Paula speak to these.
Okay, this are, let me just check that. Okay, I'm not muted. So these are some of the articles we came over across this topic of like bringing stuff to space and how is it related to in Earth and how are we doing all this at the moment. So one thing that is also really comes to across is thinking about astronauts as explorers. So one of the things back in 1744 was that sailors needed all their vitamins and nutrients to go across the oceans. And then NASA makes this analysis in metaform saying that these issues that they had before with the nutrients and food in space, they had before and the sailors had before, they actually have it also in space. So we need all these nutrients so our astronauts won't get sick. Another thing also that it gets really related with Earth and space is that using the manufacturer to understand what can survive and help astronauts in space. So they make this analogy saying that Earth is like a spaceship, and we are all astronauts on a little spaceship called Earth at the moment. And those things that we're learning here, we should also be applied in outer space. So creating biosystems for closed loop production, like in Earth, can also be applied in space. Another thing with public perception is like students growing lettuce from rocket seeds that brought for the International Space Station. They call this to be lettuce out of this world, and also we'll have the bionutrients program by NASA, who is looking at East, and 3D printing, biology research make the journey back to Earth aboard the SpaceX Dragon journey. So a lot of controversy comes to why are we doing all these things with space exploration? Why is this important? Well, the good thing about we have done with all this research is that we found that many of the applications we do and all these new technologies we're bringing to space actually are really important for technologies in Earth, because it brings innovation and a lot of things with it. So for example, we have the Nunavut greenhouses could teach the scientists how to grow food in space, and also in hostile environments such as the Arctic. Another thing also, it's we have this space ecology, which have these space applications. For example, they found out in the University of Canitra in Morocco, systems which recycle wastewater originally developed for the astronauts in the ISS are now being used for drinking water at schools. So space projects do have applications in Earth. So another thing that also comes with all this space exploration is who owns the space, and what are the rights of everyone in space. So there's some articles talking about adopting a universal tax regime for outer space exploration, because outer space is a global commons or even the common heritage of mankind, thus no state should be denied from the resources and benefits of the outer space. So this is some sore words that came on in the article, and it should be a question that should be asked when we're thinking about going to other places. Also, there is also the privatization of space, such as the launch we just had in this year. So mastering new horizons, moving even further, driven by the desire for a better life or for profit, out of the fear of out of the shore curiosity, people found ever faster, easier, cheaper, and safer ways to conquer the space between here and there. So there are really a lot of arguments with this. So another thing is like, who owns the space? Who has the right to kind of like conquer this lands, which is some language that we should redefine. And then we have this quote from President Trump saying that outer space is a legally and physically unique domain of humankind, and the United States does not view it as a global commons. So those are questions that bring up the community of when we're talking about deep space exploration. Another thing that comes with this in the public perception, it's bioengineering. So playing God, that's the way they call it colloquially. So there's a lot of criticism of synthetic biology, implying that bioengineers have no problem using their power and knowledge to disrupt nature. Tampering is morally questionable, and many scientific frontiers here on Earth before venturing to space. So that's a thing people say, and the application of biotechnological analysis and principle like this process. So those are things that we covered while researching all of this. And that's what we had according to bioethics and public perception. Now you can give us our feedback.
So this is fantastic. I want to point out, first of all, this is, so I mentioned earlier, this is a step 3 of a 4-step process called real-time technology assessment. And just the fact that as a part of you designing your new bioengineering project, you're looking at these things, you're considering these things, you're making sure that you're aware of these things as you're doing it, is an unfortunately very rare thing still. Many engineers find themselves and think of themselves too often as just makers of tools that are putting their head down and working on this particular artifact without thinking about the larger social space in which that artifact is going to be used. And the funny thing about technologies is they're literally meant to be used by human beings, but the human beings that are going to be using them, going to be affected by them, are far too often not even brought up in design decisions. And so this is fantastic, just fantastic. And one of the hopeful upshots here is that we get technical design decisions that are affected in some way by this non-technical social research. And so I'm going to ask you all first, and maybe we don't have to contain it to just this one. We had a fantastic meeting a couple of weeks ago where I know the answer is yes. Maybe we could talk about that as well. In what ways have your technical design decisions, like the actual, technical decisions you're making, how have they been affected by doing this kind of non-technical research?
Okay, I'll take over that question. So one of the things that bring up a lot, it's sustainability in space of projects. That's something that I found out that while researching all these things, you really need to make sure that whatever you're bringing out there, it's something that it comes within a cycle. So we cannot just create stuff and then create this huge problem of waste in space. If we're not sure, like, what will we do with that? So that's something we keep a lot in mind while designing our project. Like, how would people use it? Is there something that will have any harm after that? Because I think that's something really important that we came up with this research.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I one of the things that sticks out in my mind from our previous conversations is that a lot of people have been working on this, but not taking into account the actual physical environment of zero gravity and how these sorts of things would be cultured. Is anyone on that was part of that research?
I'm sorry.
Looking at bioreactors, are you meaning?
Oh, that previous work on this, only a very small amount of it had actually thought about how these things would grow in zero gravity, and the fact that they grow differently in zero gravity, right?
Yeah, we definitely have been thinking about that since that. We've looked at, well, we spoke with iGEM U Calgary, and we were going to collaborate on building a bioreactor, and we've pulled a few names from McGill, a couple professors. We plan on interviewing them. And we spoke with Scott Bryson of Orbital Farms today, who works quite a lot with bioreactors. They do some really amazing things. And he actually said that this was kind of fortunate, but scaling up isn't that much of a concern for habitation purposes because yeast is very familiar. But we have been absolutely thinking of those questions, how we're going to, like, how the astronauts will eat it, how it will be cultured. I believe, who's Natasha and Nee are here, and Labrini. Somebody was researching some of that, how the astronauts would eat it. Have you done any research yet?
No, I haven't studied
it. So yeah, that'll come in the future.
in next week, but not right now. So.
Yeah, so I think that's where we're at with that. Definitely looking at it now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one, you guys were already there. I mean, so you did, as part of step 2, which is looking at common practice around the technology, you found that a lot of people had been working on the things that were presumably to be used in space, but hadn't taken into account zero gravity. So your work now undergirds all their work, right? And so you now are able to speak to these previous projects and in a way more informed way. So yeah, you guys are doing it. You've done it. And I think it's great. I wonder about how the Canadian and just, I guess, broader public, how that might affect how you guys tell your story. And so you're doing some pretty foundational work where it's how to do this in zero gravity. Yeah. But I'm wondering how this might change, for example, the human implications portion of your presentation at the actual iGEM meet.
Paula or Gabe, what do you think?
I'm not quite if I understood the question.
I'm wondering, so let's imagine you hadn't done this sort of research, I guess. So let's imagine another world where Hillary Clinton won the presidency and everything is way better. Only 10,000 people are dead in America and they're complaining killed too many people. Let's imagine that world, which you didn't actually think about this stuff. And now you've looked into this. I wonder if you could speak to how your presentation at the actual iGEM competition, which has I always forget the name of this section. It's human
Practices?
What is it?
Human practices?
Human practices, yeah.
Okay.
So what are your big takeaways? Because this is probably too much stuff there. What are your big takeaways and how are you gonna sell this in the human practices level?
Okay.
I think we're like doing a asking each other questions thing, and it's a.
Yeah, I get it. It's a good question.
Well, if I could just kind of say something, I feel like having human practice aspect at all is already a big improvement. Because I feel like if it wasn't for this, and it wasn't for the fact that iGEM kind of pushed the human practices aspect of the project, it would just be technical. It'd be like, this is what we're doing, this is how we did it, this is how you can use it. Now it's like, oh, but this is the impacts on society, this is the impacts on futures of space flight and stuff like that. And even now, with working on the RTTA, it's beyond that. It's beyond the just surface level, what can we do with it? Now it's just on a societal level, what impacts does it have, like positive and negative, stuff like that we didn't think of otherwise.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like what I started off saying too. And it's hard sometimes because this is the focus of this talk, but it's hard to. I just want to let our listeners remember and appreciate that very few technical design projects actually look at this stuff and think about it and have it in mind.
Yeah, I will say that our interviews have definitely changed our project quite a lot. We went from, like Gabe said, like it being very technical to, I think the biggest thing was communicating the problem and the application, because just selling the science was confusing to a lot of people. So the almost like story around everything is very important, and showing them why it's an issue and why it's important has really helped us quite a lot.
Yeah, back to that, I'll say that one is one of the biggest things that we have learned, maybe trying to communicate science. It's kind of like one of the challenges, trying to make it approachable to everyone in different backgrounds, even non-scientists. Because the foundations of the project can be quite, I'll say, specific and technical, but yet the applications are pretty broad. So that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, Astro Yeast is just a fantastic name. Gets it across. If you know a little bit about Synbio, you know yeast is the sort of base of lots of things, and Astro Yeast is taking us up into outer space.
So I guess I have some questions with the public perception stuff. It seems very positive.
Yeah, you know,
Like
I wanna
last
push.
year was not.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe we should talk a little bit about last year's. This year's is a bit different. So when we talk about things in outer space, there's just a radically different framework around how the public thinks about this. Whereas, you know, last year you were all dealing with, well, maybe you give us a little primer on what you did last year.
So last year we tackled the fentanyl crisis. So we wanted to develop a wearable biosensor that people could wear on their arm. And if there was fentanyl in their bloodstream because other drugs are laced with it, or maybe they're overdosing, it would give a warning. And so emergency services could come with naloxone, which you can inject, and it would prevent the overdose long enough for them to get care. Yeah, so we did a lot of interviews, but it was based around addiction, which isn't something that people want to talk about as much as they do want to talk about space.
Yeah, addiction, and it's an actual wearable technology on a human being's body. So you have a whole like UI that necessitates the fact that we talk to people. And so last year's, this was a way bigger conversation because it was just the social, ethical, legal implications were just right there, built into it. This one is far more expansive. I think it's bigger, and so it's a little bit harder to talk about what are the ethics of technology in space. But I feel like having read especially this report and the last one on the contemporary practice, you all have actually identified some issues that you likely would not have come across. I guess I've already said this, but like one of the biggest ones I remember from our last meeting was the fact that lots of people were looking at this sort of technology, but not taking into account the different actual physical environment. Which is a nice analogy for, you know, not engineers not often taking into account the social environment in which they're working. The technical decisions that need to be made need to be different, and can almost always be improved by looking at the technical object or the artifact, as we say, through the lens of public perceptions. I wonder though, yeah, so Lancia, you said it was almost all positive. I wonder, I mean, and there was some there's an undertone of some negativity, I think, where people are often not happy about how much money is spent on these sorts of issues. And often Elon Musk gets brought up in this context. I guess it's a question of how you all sell this, and how you're thinking about it. So maybe can anyone talk about what you think the benefits might be to people that aren't in outer space from what you are all working on?
That's the key point, I think. Like a lot of people we've spoken with, oh, what was it called? There's a word for it, new space, but it's where they have applications on Earth. And our project, because it's particular to microgravity, finding applications on Earth isn't so direct. We could help with producing bionutrients on Earth, but it would be a later project. Mostly, I think it would be a contribution, like research-wise, to like discovering how yeast behaves in microgravity, sequencing that, and contributing to the body of yeast research, which is largely used to produce pharmaceuticals and understand the human body. I don't know, does anyone else have anything to add to that?
I think you covered most of it. I'll say that the biggest contribution we could give it's research based, and due to the great homology of yeast with humans, and all this research that has been done about the microgravity effects on gene expression are kind of like similar to the ones with degenerative diseases. We could get in the long run, we could get some attributions to that and contributions to that field of research. And I don't know, degenerative diseases like neurological or cardio. I don't know. That could be an application.
There's like whole websites dedicated to what they call spin-off technologies that were advanced on Earth because of NASA programs. I guess I'm looking at one of the 300 NASA social media sites right now, and yeah, a lot of them were completely accidental. Just as a result, they were doing this one thing, and then this whole other application that was not intended at the time became the thing. And the numbers are so huge here that, I mean, the case to be made about us benefiting here on Earth from a national aeronautical and space program is a great thing.
Yeah, and I know on their websites they often sell it as because we do learn a ton from being in space, just how everything works, like all the sciences, and so that does like contribute to technology here on Earth, but they do push that very strongly. So it's an interesting kind of narrative that they sell, and especially what I find fascinating is this privatization of space, which I'm not sure that everybody really understands, but you know, they're building a gateway on the moon, which will be kind of a jumping point, and going to Mars, and they're very much doing it. There's a lot of researchers contributing to it, and then also not only are people going up in commercial flights, but experiments are going up in commercial flights. So I guess like in doing this RTTA2 and looking and seeing, because it is sold also as a very collaborative community in space on the ISS. A lot of the space agencies do work together. But then, of course, seeing the states kind of making those comments, oh, it's a little scary. It's kind of like another, you know, what's going to happen up there, you know, if people start claiming territories. Like it's very real, and I don't doubt that, like, it's already militarized up there to an extent. So there's some interesting questions to be had.
It most certainly is. And yeah, there's some good articles in Wired magazine. You can go to wired.com and look at this about what the sort of larger plan is for Elon Musk and people similar to him. And there's definitely some serious questions to be asked about whether or not we should, as a people, be devoting the amount of resources we are to those sorts of projects. Yeah, and so let's maybe think about the fourth and last step of real-time technology assessment, which is really meant to be a retrospective look back. And what it asks you to do is to look at the three earlier steps and identify moments where technical design decisions were affected in any way by the kind of non-technical considerations that we've been discussing. And that can mean that you paused for a moment and thought about doing this the other way and decided not to and kept doing it the original way. That counts, right? So I'm wondering, just to put you all on the spot, and you haven't done this one yet, but so maybe if you have any pre-thoughts about how you might write this fourth section, how has the technical design of your technology, and it doesn't have to just be the thing, right? Think about the larger system in which it's being used. How has your thinking about that been affected by these now three steps that we've been through?
Just on top of my head, I'll say like one of the things that we've been thinking about how would people actually use it. That's something that like we can like create food in space and make this thing, but if it doesn't taste well, then they won't eat it if it doesn't look good.
So that's a really important one. So like taste.
Yeah. Yeah, like it has to be good. It has to be tasty, and that's stuff that we had to take into account whenever we develop that like right to give. Well, not right, but like when we're given this product of like consumable foods in space that are being produced by yeast, I'll say. Yeah, that's the other thing I'll think about is like once we're done with that, what are we gonna do with the leftovers? Any waste that will be produced with this bioproduction in space? What are we gonna do with that? Like there has to be something we should think about and make sure that whatever we produce, the waste is not gonna be like harsh or like something bad for the astronauts, and not create more waste that they can already have. I'll think, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So it's more like process thinking instead of artifact thinking. Like you're not making a thing. It's part of a process. It's meant to be used in a certain way. It's good. What about is there any intellectual property issues going on with this?
Not yet.
So you guys, so let's say you guys come across like an actual awesome process. What how are you going to deal with that? Is it
Well,
for the world or?
it's research based, right? So yeah, we'd have to see when we get there, because it's definitely under Concordia University to some extent. I'm not sure how it grows from there, what that process is. iGEM research is open. So we are kind of like open source share at this point.
Is that a rule of iGEM?
Well, you can, like, people do have startups, from it, but if you publish it, and if we took it, like if we got something amazing, I think we've been so fortunate with this project. I can't even tell you the people we've connected with and how generous they've been with us. Like willing to consult us for entrepreneurial reasons, sharing protocols with us. It's really beautiful. Dr. Corey Nislow has been helping us out a lot. Canadian Space Agency has been incredibly kind. Again, Orbital Farm State, Dr. Richard Barker. There's been some really supportive people, including also Hildy Stenuit. She's Ice Cube Services. So these are all people that have offered and are willing to help us to put our project into space or to bring it to something else. So I think that's where you would go. And then it would become into this world of like a company, which I don't know the details. I don't know if anybody else knows that better, but.
So Concordia has some very well thought out intellectual property things, and some people I think unfairly criticize them because they just assume that the university is going to try to own your work, and I think it's actually quite the opposite. They're there to give you legal protection, and so they're not actually trying to financially benefit all the time, and instead are there to help you protect your intellectual property. And so there's people I can put you in touch with there.
There's also D3, which I always, we work so closely with them, forget about them sometimes, but they just started at Loyola. So they're there to encourage startups from our, in the sciences, basically. So that would be a good starting point.
Yeah, D3's good. We, the Center of Engineering and Society I teach in, we have a graduate certificate program. So after you guys are all done getting your degrees, you could get a degree through, and it's basically half talking with us about these sorts of things, and then the other half is actually working with District 3. And the idea is to get your own startup going, but you also get a nice graduate certificate. I think it's called Innovation, Technology, and Society. That was a nice moment for me to plug that.
It seems like an appropriate thing to plug.
Yeah, so go ahead.
Yep. Oh yeah, so this is good. So you guys are the actual iGEM meeting, I know I asked this last time and I've already forgotten, but it's in October, right?
November this year because
November. Yeah, I remember that immediately. Yep. Cool. So we have a few more months, and the last step of this is meant to be a retrospective thing. So I think we should all meet again after, like, you feel like you're done the prototype, after you're done whatever it is you're actually going to present. It should be after, because the general idea is, as I've said, is that we're going to do a retrospective look on how looking at these kinds of non-technical, there's too often called soft skills, and I hate that word. I think I like the word professional skills better. What a professional engineer is, the skills that a professional engineer needs is better. So I think that's our plan. And what we're going to do is put together the whole 4-part report, and you'll have your human practices section, and it'll be founded on well-established literature in the social sciences about technology assessment. I think one of the things that's allowed me to sell this model, so I've been working with like McGill, Toronto, University of Toronto, UPEI, Memorial, there's a couple others in there somewhere, on sort of just like spreading this model. I think one of the nice things is that it's grounded in actual, like, really good social science for the last, I don't know, 30 years. I mean, you can go back to the 90s and find technology assessment, design practices literature. But no one has thought to bring it to design courses in engineering. And so this is, I think you guys are an awesome example of this. And yeah, looking forward to being able to wrap this all up in just a couple months. I assume it's going to be online.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it in Boston every year, or is it?
Oh, they're going to Paris next year.
Oh, Paris.
Mhm. Yeah, that could be fun.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for all of your feedback again. Anybody from the team, you have any last questions or anything you want to ask about feedback you received before?
I don't have any.
I'm all
questions.
good.
Okay, awesome. Great.
Cool. We'll talk offline about the last meeting, or whatever. Next doesn't have to be the last meeting.
Thank you so much for your feedback.
Thank you all. Maybe something we should say, since we're on Facebook, like, this is all voluntary. This is an extracurricular activity that you are all doing without getting credit for it. I am helping there's no credit associated with me either. Like, we're all here for fun. So join iGEM.
Recruitment is open.
We're building a microgravity simulator.
Just saying.
Cool. Okay, gorgeous. Talk to
Great.
everyone soon.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Stay safe.